How was your day? Maybe you spent it somewhere warm and safe and still felt, underneath it all, the quiet pull of a place you couldn't name. There's a woman in the old island stories who knew that feeling better than anyone. She lived in a warm house, loved and kept, and still the sea called her name. If today felt a little like that, she'd understand. So let your shoulders down now. Let the day go soft. We'll walk out onto a cold, pale shore together, and there, by moonlight, a woman is lifting something gray and silken to her face. The seals are calling from the dark water, dozens of round heads watching, and the woman on the sand holds her own gray skin against her cheek and weeps and almost laughs all at once. Behind her, a small house glows on the hill. Inside it, a child sleeps. In front of her, the whole sea waits, and she must choose. Hold this image. We'll come back to it. Here is the riddle the old people left in this story. What do you do with something you love when the only way to keep it is to take away the thing that makes it free? A man found her on this shore once, long before the child, long before the gray hair. He saw her dancing in the moonlight, and he made a choice that would hold for years. Maybe you already know how this kind of story turns. Most of us have held on to something too tightly. Most of us have been held too tightly too. This is both of those at once. This is what we do here, every week. One old story, one quiet night. Something that happened long ago on a far cold shore and still has something to say to you.
So get comfortable now. Adjust your pillow. Find your warmth. If you drift off before the seals stop singing, they won't mind. The old sea has watched over sleeping people for a very long time.
This is only the beginning of her story. The part most people never reach. The choice on the shore. That's still far ahead. But not tonight. Tonight we only begin. If tonight feels like something, you can subscribe. We'll be here next week. Another old story. Another quiet night like this one. Now, back to the shore. Salt in the air. Cold sand under bare feet. The long sigh of the sea drawing back over stones. This is where her story begins, on a shore at the edge of the world. In those days, the islands were small and the sea was everything. It gave the fish, it took the boats. The people learned to love a thing that could not be held. Remember that for later. And out past the breakers lived the seal folk. By day, seals, gray and silver, slipping through the kelp. But on certain nights, the old people said, they could lay their skins aside. Lay the skin aside, and underneath was a person. Pale, sea-eyed, and free in two worlds. They danced on the sand when the moon was full, then slipped back into the gray and were gone. One man lived alone above this shore. A crofter, a fisherman. His house was warm and his nets were full, and still, when the fire died down each night, the quiet was very loud. Then one moonlit night, he heard something on the shore that was not the sea, a sound like laughter, like singing, and he went down the cliff path to see and crossed into the old world. Stay with him. Before we meet the man at the water's edge, let me show you the people of the sea, not as creatures to fear, as something older and gentler, neighbors almost, who simply lived beneath the waves. They called the great rock Sula scary. Half a day's sail out, where no boat lingered. There the seal folk gathered in their hundreds, and there their old king held the deep water in his keeping. Among them swam a young one. Quick, curious, always drifting a little farther than the rest, toward the shallows, toward the shore, toward the warm lights that glowed on the land at night. The old ones warned her, stay deep, stay far. The land is not for us, and the land folk do not understand keeping a thing without holding it. But she was young, and the lights were so warm. Maybe you know that pull. The window across the street with the lamp lit. Someone else's warm room. The wondering what it would be like to belong to a life that isn't yours. She wondered that, often. On the nights when the moon was round and low, the seal folk did a thing the land never saw. They came ashore on the silver sand. They loosened their skins, and they stepped out as people. It is hard to say what they felt in those hours. The closest word is relief, like setting down something you carry all day and didn't know was heavy, like breathing out. They danced because they could. The young one danced longest of all. She loved the feel of sand instead of water, the cold air on bare skin, the strange light gravity of a body that walked. She forgot a little to watch the moon. That is who she was, before the story took hold of her. Free in two worlds, belonging fully to neither. light. Now let me bring you to the man on the hill, who belonged to only one and ached. His name was Callum. He had buried a wife young, and no child had come. He worked the croft and the boat with his big scarred hands, and he was kind, and he was very, very lonely. He had heard the old tales of the seal folk, as everyone had. He had never believed them. They were stories for the fire, for frightening children. The sea was just the sea. He was sure of it. But loneliness has a way of making a man listen to the night, and on the night the moon hung low and round, he heard it. A sound on the shore that was not waves, voices, laughter, singing. He took the cliff path down in the dark, one hand on the cold rock. He told himself it was nothing. Seals, maybe, wind in a cave. But his heart was already pounding louder than the sea. He came around the last black boulder, and he stopped. On the sand below him, pale figures were dancing, women and men of no village he knew. Light as foam, and on the rocks beside them lay gray skins. He understood then, all at once, that every old story was true, and in the same breath he saw her, the one dancing apart from the rest, head back, arms wide, lost in the joy of it, and something in him turned over. He had not felt anything in years, not since the grave on the hill, and here was a woman made of moonlight and sea, laughing at nothing, and he wanted, more than he had wanted anything, for the night not to end. Here is the part the old tellers always slowed down for, because what he did next was not cruel. He was not a wicked man, he was a lonely one, and that sometimes is how the worst choices begin. The old people had a saying about the seal folk. A Selkie cannot stay long on the land unless someone keeps her skin. Hold the skin, and you hold the Selkie. He had heard it as a child. He remembered it now. She had laid her own skin a little apart from the others, the way she always wandered apart. It was the nearest to him. He had only to reach out, and the wanting in him was louder than the warning. He took it, quietly. He gathered the cool gray skin into his arms, heavier than he expected, and warm like something living. And he turned, and he climbed back up the cliff path in the dark, and he did not look back. Down on the shore, the moon began to sink. One by one, the others felt the turning of the tide in their blood. They found their skins, they slipped them on, and they poured back into the gray water like rain returning to a river. All but one. She searched the rocks where her skin should have been. She searched again and again on her knees in the cold foam, and slowly, terribly, she understood that it was gone. Stay with her now. This is the heart of it. The rule the whole story turns on. Hold the skin, hold the Selkie. As long as Callum kept that gray skin hidden, Mara could not return to the sea. She was bound to the land. She did not know yet who had taken it. She only knew the morning came, and she was still standing, cold and bare and human, on a shore that no longer felt like hers. The sea drew back without her. And up on the hill, Callum could not sleep. He sat by his fire with the gray skin folded on his knees, and he ran his hands over it, and he told himself, over and over, that he had only wanted not to be alone. When the sun was full up, he went down to the shore as if by chance, and there she was, a woman alone on the sand. No village, no boat, no kin, looking at the sea like it had broken a promise. He gave her his coat. He spoke softly, the way you speak to a frightened animal. He did not say what he had done. He said only, "Come up to the house. There is a fire. You'll catch your death out here." She had nowhere else to go. The sea would not take her, and she did not know why. So she followed the kind man up the cliff path, looking back at the water every few steps, the way you look at a door closing. The croft was warm. There was a fire and broth and a dry wool blanket. To a body that had only ever known cold water, the warmth was strange and almost frightening. She sat very still and watched the flames. He did not ask her where she came from. He thought he knew, and she did not tell him she was searching for a thing she could not name, because she did not yet understand that the thing was somewhere over her head, in his roof. This is the bargain that was never really a bargain. He did not buy her, or trick her with words. He simply held the one thing she needed and waited, and let the cold sea do the rest. She stayed because she could not leave. Word went round the village fast. The lonely crofter had a wife now. A quiet one, from no kirk and no kin, who would not say her name. They called her Mara, sea, because it was the only word she answered to. Only old Bessa, who remembered the old tales the way she remembered her own children, looked at the sea-pale woman and went very quiet. She knew those eyes. She had heard of those eyes. But she said nothing, not yet. The days became weeks. Mara learned the shapes of a human life, how to bank a fire, how to card wool, how to bake on a girdle stone. Her hands were clever. Her heart was somewhere out past the breakers. Every evening when the work was done, she went to the door and looked at the sea. Callum noticed. He said nothing. But each time she looked at the water, something tightened, small and cold, in his chest. And here is the strangest part. The part that makes this an old story and not a simple one. He was good to her. Truly good. He was gentle and patient, and the loneliness left his house. And slowly, slowly, she did not hate him. You can be grateful to someone and grieve because of them at the same time. You can build a real warmth on top of a real wound. The old people knew that. They did not pretend the heart was simple. Neither will we. She came to love the smell of peat smoke and the weight of a wool blanket. She came to love the way the kettle sang, but she never stopped loving the sea more. Both things were true. They stayed true for years. The seals came closer to that shore than any other on the coast. Callum noticed that too. When Mara walked the tide line, gray heads rose from the water and followed her, slow and silent, as far as the headland would let them. She would crouch at the water's edge and speak to them in a low voice that was not quite words, and they would answer. And Callum, watching from the hill, understood that he had not married a woman, he had married a whole sea, and he was afraid. So he climbed up into the rafters one night while she slept, and he wrapped the gray skin tighter, and he pushed it deeper into the thatch, where no chance hand could ever find it. He thought that would settle his fear. It did not. Remember the roof. Let me step back from the fire for a moment, the way the old tellers did, and tell you where this story comes from. Because real people on real cold islands believed in the seal folk, and they had their reasons. Out in Orkney and Shetland, north of all of Scotland, the land is bare and the sea is close. The gray seals there have round, soft, almost human eyes. When one surfaces and looks at you, it is very hard to feel alone. And these were Norse shores once, settled by the people who told of shape-changers and the wild folk of the deep. Norse and Celtic blood mixed here, and so did their stories. The Selkie was born from both, a child of two seas. Some island families even said the seals were their own drowned kin, come back in another shape to swim near the shore, so they would not hunt them. To kill a seal was to risk killing a grandmother. The sea held everyone they had lost. So when you hear the Selkie story, hear it kindly. It was not made to scare. It was made by people who lived between land and water, who lost so much to the sea, and who needed to believe that the sea, sometimes, gave something back. Now back to the croft on the hill, where the fire still burns and the skin still hides. Time moved on for Callum and Mara, the way it does, quietly, and then all at once. And one spring a third heart began to beat in that house. The child was a girl. They named her Aelid. She came in the early dark of a spring morning, small and loud, with her father's gray-green eyes, and around them the dark rim of her mother's sea-black gaze. Something in Mara changed the day Aelid was born. The sea did not stop calling. But now there was another tide in her, small, warm, and entirely her own. For the first time, the land had given her something the water never could. Maybe you know that too. The way a small life can root you to a place you never chose. The way love can become a gentle anchor, and how an anchor, however kind, is still a thing that holds you down. For a while, the house was as happy as any house on the island. Callum's guilt grew quiet under the weight of those good days. He almost let himself forget the bundle in the roof. Almost. It was always there, in the corner of his eye. Aelid grew the way island children grow, fast, fearless, and salt-rough. She walked early. She ran to the water before she could be stopped. And the seals, who followed her mother, began to follow her too. By the time she was 8, Aelid was more sea than land. She knew every tide pool and every rock. She could hold her breath longer than any child in the village, and she loved her mother with a fierce and watchful love. She had begun to notice things, the way her mother's eyes went far away at the door each evening, the way her mother flinched, just slightly, whenever the seals cried out at night, the way her mother was always, somehow, a little bit somewhere else. One evening, Eilid asked her, soft as a secret, "Ma'am, why do you always look at the sea like that?" And Mara was quiet for a long time. Then she said only, "Because I left something out there long ago, and I have never stopped missing it." The child did not understand, but she remembered. Children keep the things we say to them in the dark, long after we forget. Eilid kept that one. Remember that. She will need it before the end. Old Bessa came up to the croft sometimes, on the excuse of trading wool. But she came to watch Mara, and one day, when Callum was out on the boat, the old woman set down her stick and spoke plainly at last. "I know what you are," the old woman said. "I knew the first day. I'll not tell a soul. But I'll tell you this, lass, what was taken from you is not gone. A thing like that cannot be destroyed. It is only hidden, and what is hidden can be found." It was the first time anyone had said it aloud. Mara's hands began to shake. For years she had told herself the skin was lost to the sea, gone forever, and so she had stopped looking. Now the old woman had cracked that quiet open. Bessa took up her stick and went to the door. At the threshold she paused. "He is not a bad man," she said, "you're Callum. But love that holds too tight is its own kind of cage. You'll both learn that, one way or another." That night, for the first time in years, Mara looked at her own roof. Not at the window, not at the sea. At the rafters, at the thatch, at the dark spaces between the beams where a thing might be hidden, and she began, quietly, to wonder. But she did not search. Not then. Because she looked across at her sleeping husband, and at the small bed where Eilid slept, and she felt the anchor of them, warm and real, and she was afraid of what finding the skin might cost. So she carried two hearts after that night. One that loved the warm house and the child and even the kind, foolish man, and one that lay awake listening to the seals, counting the tides, wondering where in the roof her old self was sleeping. Callum felt the change in her, though he could not name it. She grew quieter. She lingered longer at the shore. She held Eilid tighter, as if she were already saying a goodbye that hadn't come yet, and his old fear woke up. He started to check the roof, in secret when she was at the shore. He would climb up and put his hand on the bundle, just to know it was still there, and every time his fingers found it, he felt ashamed, and relieved, and ashamed again. Maybe you have held on to something that way, not because keeping it made you happy, but because letting it go felt like a kind of dying. He could not give her the sea. He did not know how to stop loving her enough to try. The seal folk had not forgotten Mara, out at Selkie. The old Grey King still kept the count of his people. And he knew that one of his own was missing, landlocked, year after year, behind the glass of a warm yellow window. He sent the young seals first. They came to the shore below the croft more and more, night after night, and they sang. Not cruelly, like family at a window, calling a daughter to come home for supper. And Mara heard every note. The song was the saddest and the sweetest sound. It said, "We remember you." It said, "There is a place still kept for you." It said, "You do not have to be so far from yourself forever." And it nearly broke her in two. Callum heard it too. He lay rigid in the dark, listening to the sea call his wife by a name he would never know, and he held her tighter in her sleep, as if his two arms could outweigh a whole ocean. They could not. He knew it. He held on anyway. Eilid heard the singing, and unlike the grown-ups, she was not afraid of it. She thought it was beautiful. She would creep to the window and listen, and once she swore the seals were looking right at her, and that one of them, the biggest, nodded. She did not know the seals were her kin. She did not know her mother had a gray skin sleeping in the roof. She only knew the sea felt like home in a way she could not explain, and that her mother was sad, and that she wanted more than anything to fix it. So now you know them all, the sea woman who loves and grieves at once, the kind man whose love became a lock, the child who is half of each world, the old woman who knows, and the patient king out on the rock, counting tides. And you know the one thing the whole story balances on, a gray skin, folded and bound, hidden in the dark of a roof. As long as it stays hidden, the sea woman stays. The moment it is found, everything changes. The old tellers never rushed this part. They let you sit in the warmth of that house, and love it, and dread for it all at once. Because the deepest stories are never about good people and bad people. They are about good people holding on too tight. For now, let the house be warm. Let the fire burn low. let the seals sing far off, and the child sleep, and the woman lie awake with her two hearts, and the man hold on. Nothing has broken yet. Tonight, just this. But the years were turning towards something. You can feel it, the way you feel weather change before it arrives. Soon there would be a storm, a real one, with black waves and a small boat caught out in it. And after the storm, nothing would be the same. Before the storm, there were good years. Let me give you those first. The way the sea gives you a calm morning before it turns. Quiet days, full of small things, the kind you only know were happy after they are gone. Mara had her ways of touching the sea without leaving it. Each dawn she walked the tide line and let the cold foam reach her ankles. It was not the deep water, but it was salt, and it was home, and it was enough to live on. Callum learned to read her moods like he read the weather. On her gray days he left her be. On her bright days he brought her the things the sea gave up, a whorled shell, a sea-smoothed stone, a feather, small apologies he could not say aloud. She kept those gifts on the windowsill in a careful row. Shells, stones, a gull feather, a piece of green sea glass. To anyone else it was clutter. To her it was a small museum of the sea she could not reach. She dusted it like an altar. Aelid grew taller and wilder. She could name every bird on the cliff and every weed in the pools. She swam in water that turned the village children blue. The sea did not bite her the way it bit them. Callum noticed and said nothing. Mara taught her daughter the things a mother teaches. How to bake, how to mend, how to tell a kind person from a clever one. But she also taught her things no village mother knew. How to read the tide by the color of the sky, how to listen to the sea. Sit still, her mother would say. Sit still and listen. The sea is always speaking. Most people only hear noise, but if you go quiet enough inside, you can hear it telling you things. And the girl learned to go quiet and to hear. Maybe someone taught you that once. To go quiet enough to hear what is really there. It is a rare gift to pass on. Mara gave it to her daughter without ever knowing it would be the thing that brought her home. On the calmest summer evenings, the whole family would walk down to the shore together. Callum would skip stones, Aelid would hunt for crabs, and Mara would stand at the edge of the water, and for a little while, all three of them were happy at once. Those were the evenings Callum lived for. He would look at the two of them against the gold of the sunset and think, this is enough, surely this is enough, surely she could be happy with this. And for the length of a sunset, he could almost believe it. But the sunsets always ended. The cold came up off the water. And as they climbed the cliff path home, Mara would look back always, one last time, and Callum would pretend always that he did not see her do it. There was a year the fishing was poor, and the whole village went hungry thin through the winter. Callum rowed out farther and stayed out longer, chasing the herring that would not come close. Mara watched the empty sea for his sail every dusk. And then a strange thing began. Callum's nets, alone of all the village, started coming up full. Herring, mackerel, fat and silver, more than he could carry. The other men muttered. They did not understand it, but Mara did. It was the seal folk. Out of love for one of their own, out of love for Mara, they drove the fish to Callum's net. They were feeding the family that held their lost daughter. Even the kindness of the sea folk had a sorrow folded inside it. Mara understood the gift and what it meant. The sea was not angry with her. The sea was waiting for her. It would keep her family fed for as long as it took. The seal folk had patience the way the tide has patience. They could wait years. That winter the croft was warm and the bellies were full, and the village called Callum lucky. He took the luck and asked no questions. But sometimes, gutting the silver fish by lamplight, he would feel the weight of the roof above him and go quiet. Aelid asked her mother once why the seals helped them. Mara was quiet a long moment. Then she said, because they are kind and because they have not forgotten someone. The child asked who, and Mara only kissed her hair and did not answer. The seasons wheeled on. Aelid lost her baby teeth and grew new ones. Callum's beard went grayer. Mara did not age the way they did. Her sea-pale face stayed smooth. Her dark hair stayed dark. The village began very quietly to notice. They did not say the word Selkie, but mothers drew their children a little closer when Mara passed, and the kirk folk crossed themselves, and the kindness of the village cooled into a careful, watchful distance. Mara felt it. She was used to being apart. It hurt Aelid more than her mother. The other children stopped playing with her. They called her the seal girl, and they said her ma'am wasn't right, and they would not say why. Aelid came home one day with grazed knuckles, and would not say why either. That night Mara held her daughter and said, "Let them talk. We do not need them. We have the sea, and the sea is bigger than any village." And Aelid, fierce and loyal, believed her. The sea was theirs, that much at least was true. Callum saw his daughter shut out and his wife held apart, and the guilt that had gone quiet woke up again, louder than before. He had wanted a family. He had built one on a stolen skin, and now the whole village could feel the wrongness of it, even if they had no word for it. Here's the part the myths never make obvious. The thing Callum did was done in one moonlit moment years ago, but the cost of it was not paid once. It was paid every single day, by everyone, in small coins of sorrow. That is how such things are paid. And yet, and the old tellers always held on to this, there was real love in that house. Not a lie dressed as love, real. Callum would have died for either of them. Mara would have wept at his grave. The wound and the love grew from the same root. One night Mara could not sleep, and she rose and she stood beneath the rafters in the dark. She lifted her eyes to the thatch where she had begun to suspect the skin was hidden. She raised one hand toward it, and then Aelid cried out from a dream and she stopped. She went to her daughter instead. She soothed the bad dream, smoothed the tangled hair, lay down beside the small warm body until the child slept again. And the skin stayed hidden one more night, held there not by Callum, but by love, her own. Do you see how the cage worked, in the end? It was not really the skin in the roof, it was the child by the fire. It was the kind man's gray hair. It was love itself, holding her gently down. The hardest cages are the ones we would not leave, even if the door swung open. The seal's song grew bolder as the years passed. Where once the seals had sung only on the lowest moons, now they came many nights, gathering below the croft, lifting their voices toward the one lit window. They were not giving up. The sea never gives up. Callum took to stuffing wool in the window cracks to muffle the sound. It did not help. The song came up through the stone, through the floor, through Mara's own blood. You cannot wall out a thing that is already inside the one you are trying to keep. There came a still, strange night when the song stopped, utterly. The seals fell silent all at once, and the sudden quiet woke Mara from a dead sleep. She had lived with that song so long that its absence was louder than any cry. She went to the window. The shore was empty, not one seal, but far out, where the deep water began. A single great head broke the surface, gray, scarred, immense. It looked at her window across all that dark water, and then it sank, and the song began again, but changed. The song that came after was deeper, older. It was not the young seals pleading now. It was the king himself. And his song did not say "come home" like a child being called. It said something heavier. It said, "Soon, it is almost time. Remember that word." Mara did not understand the whole of it, but her body did. She felt a tide turning in her that had nothing to do with the moon. Something was coming. The long waiting was nearly over, one way or another. She lay back down and did not sleep. In the days that followed, the weather began to turn. Old Bessa read the sky and shook her head. The gulls came inland and would not settle. The cattle were restless. Everyone who knew the sea knew the signs. A great storm was building far out and coming in. The wise men of the village hauled their boats high and lashed them down and mended their roofs. They did not go out. The sea in that mood took whatever it could reach. Everyone made ready, battened down, and waited for the wind. Everyone but one. There was a boy from the village out fishing when the first warnings came, a fisherman's son no older than 14, who had rowed too far chasing a good shoal and not watched the sky. When the wind rose, his small boat could not make it home, and the village saw it. They gathered on the shore, helpless. No grown man would launch into that rising sea, and no one blamed them. To go out was to die too. The boy's mother screamed into the wind, and Callum, standing among them, looked at the small boat and at his own boat lashed safe and high, and he could not bear it. Mara grabbed his arm. "Don't," she said. "That sea will take you." But Callum looked at her, and at the screaming mother, and he said, "If it were our Aelid out there, what would I want a man to do?" And he had no answer for that. Neither did she. He cut his boat loose and dragged it down the slipway alone. 3 younger men, shamed by his courage, ran to help him launch. and then Callum was out on the black water in the failing light, rowing toward the boy with everything in his scarred arms. And Mara watched him go. This is the part of the story that survived 3,000 winters, not because of the storm. Storms are common, but because of what Mara did next. She turned from the shore, and she ran, not to the croft, but to the standing stone above the sea. At the standing stone, where the old folk had begged the sea for mercy for 1,000 years, Mara knelt in the driving rain, and she did the one thing she had never done. She called out in the language that was not quite words, to her own people. She begged the seal folk to save him. It cost her something to call them. She was asking the sea to save the man who had stolen her from it. She was asking her own freedom to keep her cage intact, but she did not hesitate, because she loved him. Both things were true. They had always been true. And the sea answered, far out. The great gray king heard the voice of his lost daughter raised in fear, and he did not pause to weigh the matter. Whatever the man had done, this was kin calling. He turned the whole gray host of the seal folk toward the drowning boats. Out on the black water, Callum had reached the boy. He had hauled the half-drowned child into his own boat, but now the storm had them both, and the waves were mountains, and his small craft was filling, and his arms were spent, and the shore was a smear of foam impossibly far away. And then the sea around the boat came alive with gray backs. Dozens of seals, then 100, pressing close on every side. They did not let the boat go over. They ringed it, lifted it, steadied it between their bodies, and began slowly, against the whole strength of the storm, to push it home. Callum understood in that moment exactly what was saving him and why. He looked into the dark eyes of the seal nearest his hand, round, soft, almost human, and he knew these were her people. The sea he had robbed was carrying him home, and he wept, out there in the storm, where no one could see. On the shore, the villagers saw the impossible. A boat that should have been lost, riding home on a road of gray backs through a killing sea. They fell silent. They did not have a word for it. But Mara, running down from the standing stone, had every word. She had called this, and it had come. The seals brought the boat through the last breakers and into the shallows, and there they let it go and slipped back into the dark. Hands reached out. The boy was dragged ashore alive, coughing seawater, and Callum stumbled onto the sand and fell to his knees, spent and alive and changed. Mara reached him. She fell into the wet sand beside him and held his soaked, shaking body, and he held her back, and neither of them said a word. The storm howled on above them. But something between them had shifted, out there on the water. Hold this. We will return to it. Let me pause here, with them safe on the sand, and tell you something about that gray skin in the roof, because the old people did not mean it as a simple coat. The seal skin in this story is not just a thing, it is a self. Think of the thing in you that is most yourself, the part that knows how to be free, the work you were made for, the music in you, the wide thing you used to be before life folded you small. The old people would call that your seal skin. And everyone, the story says, has had a skin taken from them at one time or another. By someone who loved them, by duty, by fear, by a life that needed them to stay small and dry and useful. Maybe you can name the one who keeps yours. Maybe it is you. That is why this small island tale outlived the islands. It is not really about seals. It is about the wild, free, true part of a person, and what happens to a soul when that part is folded up and hidden in the dark, for love, for years. Hold that thought gently as we go on, because Mara's skin is still in the roof, and a person can live a long time without their truest self. They can even be happy, in a quiet way, but they cannot live forever, and the sea knows it. Now back to the morning after the storm. The sky washed clean and pale. The whole village came up to Callum's croft, the same village that had drawn its children back from Mara. They came humble now, with bread and ale and thanks. The boy's mother knelt in the mud at Callum's door and could not speak. And the village, who had whispered about the seal woman, now whispered something new, that the seals had come because of her, that she had a power, that the strange wife on the hill had saved one of their own. For the first time, Mara was not the stranger to be feared. She was the one who had called the sea to mercy. Aelid stood beside her mother, fierce and proud, and the children who had called her seal girl did not meet her eyes. Something in the village had healed, but Callum was not at ease, because he had seen, out on the water, exactly what Mara was, and exactly what she had given up to save him. She had called her own people and asked them not to free her, but to keep her here. For his sake, he could not stop thinking about it. That night, when the village had gone and the fire was low, Callum sat across from Mara and could not look at her. And at last he said, very quietly, the thing he had never said in all their years. He said, "I know what you are. I have always known, and I am the one who took it." The silence after those words was the longest of their lives. Mara did not weep, and she did not rage. She had known in her bones for years. To hear it aloud only made it real. She looked at him a long time. Then she asked the only question that mattered. Where is it? And Callum, who had come so close out on that stormy sea to becoming a better man, felt the old fear close over him like cold water. If he told her where the skin was, she would take it, she would go, he would lose her. And so, even now, he could not say. He said only, I cannot lose you. I know it is wrong. I have always known. But I cannot. And he put his face in his scarred hands and wept like a child. And Mara looked at this broken, loving, selfish man and felt her heart break for him, even now, even now. So the confession changed everything and nothing. Now they both knew the truth, and still the skin stayed hidden, and still Mara stayed. But a door had opened that could not be closed again. The thing was spoken now, and spoken things have a way of working themselves loose. After that night, Mara began to fade, not all at once, but the village women noticed her cheeks hollow, her sea-pale skin go paler still, her dark hair lose its shine. She who had not aged in years suddenly seemed tired in a way that sleep could not mend. Old Bessa came up the hill, looked at her once and knew. A Selkie kept too long from the sea will wither, she told Callum at the door, low and hard. The skin is not a toy you can keep forever. Keep it much longer, and you will not have a wife, you will have a grave. Callum had wanted, his whole life, only not to be alone, and now his holding on was killing the very thing he held. He understood it now, he understood it completely, and still, God help him, he could not make his hands climb to the roof and give it back. Maybe you have known that exact helplessness. To see clearly the right thing, the kind thing, the only thing, and to find that some old fear has welded your hands to your sides. Callum was not a monster, he was just a man who could not let go. Many of us are. It was Eilidh who saw it most clearly of all. She did not know about skins or selkies, but she knew her mother was dying. She watched her mam grow thin and gray by the sea she loved, and she felt a child's pure, furious certainty that something was wrong and that someone must fix it. Eilidh remembered what her mother had told her, long ago in the dark. I left something out there, and I have never stopped missing it. The child had kept those words, the way children do, and now, watching her mother fade, she began to wonder what that something was and where it had gone. She began to watch her father, the way her mother had watched the roof. The child now watched the man, and she noticed how his eyes went, sometimes to the rafters, how he checked something up there when he thought no one saw, how he grew anxious if she climbed too high to play. A child is a patient detective. Eilidh said nothing. She only watched and waited and put the pieces together slowly, the way her mother had taught her to read the tide. The sea is always speaking. Her mother had said, so is a house, so is a father with a secret. Meanwhile, the sea grew impatient. Mara was fading faster now, and the seal folk could feel their lost daughter guttering like a candle. Each night they pressed closer to the shore. The Grey King himself came into the shallows, where no great seal had ever dared, and called. Callum heard the king's call and barred the door and trembled. He knew the sea had come for what was his, or what he had made his. He held his fading wife close and whispered that he loved her, over and over, as if the words could be a wall. They could not. He knew it. He said them anyway. And Mara in his arms was almost too weak now to long for anything. That was the worst of it. The fading had reached even her longing. She no longer cried at the seal song. She no longer went to the window. She lay still and grew lighter and slipped a little further away each day. Eilidh sat by her mother's bed and held that light, cold hand and made a child's solemn vow. I will find what you lost, ma'am. I will find it and give it back, and then you will be well again. She did not fully understand what she was promising, but she meant it with her whole heart. The chance came on a gray afternoon when Callum rode out to check his lines and Bessa sat dozing by the fire. Eilidh, small and quick and quiet, dragged the wooden settle to the wall below the darkest corner of the rafters, and she began to climb. She climbed onto the back of the settle and then onto a beam, the way she climbed the cliffs, sure-footed and fearless. She reached into the dark thatch where she had seen her father reach. Her small fingers found cobwebs, dust, the dry stalks of old herbs, and then something else, something soft. She worked it loose from between the beams and drew it down into the gray light, a bundle bound with old cord. She unwound the cord with trembling fingers, and the thing unfolded, cool and gray and silver and soft as nothing she had ever touched. A skin, a sealskin. And Aelid knew. She did not know how she knew, but she knew all the way down. This was the thing her mother had lost. This soft gray skin was the something out there that her mother had never stopped missing. It had been over their heads the whole time. She climbed down with the skin clutched to her chest, and she went to her mother's bed. "Ma'am," she whispered. "Ma'am, look, I found it. I found what you lost." And she laid the cool gray skin into her mother's frail, open hands. What happened then, Aelid would remember for the rest of her life. Her mother's fingers closed on the skin, and color came back into them. The dull gray hands grew warm and sea-pale again. Mara's eyes opened wide and dark and full of light, and she drew a breath like a drowning woman reaching air. She sat up. She had not sat up in days. She looked at the skin in her hands as though looking at her own face after a lifetime in the dark. And then she looked at her daughter, her brave, foolish, beloved daughter, who had just given her back herself and taken away her reason to stay in the very same breath. And in that moment, Aelid saw it cross her mother's face. Mara understood that she now had to choose. The sea or the child, herself or her family. The thing she had longed for every day of her captivity was finally, warmly, in her own two hands, and it would cost her everything else she loved. Down the hill, Callum's boat was already turning for home. Some instinct, some cold prickle on the back of his neck had told him something was wrong. He rowed harder than he had rowed in the storm. The croft sat quiet on the hill. The door was open, he did not yet know. Inside, Mara rose from the bed for the first time in days, strong and straight, the sealskin in her arms. Bessa had woken, and the old woman looked at the skin and at the woman, and she understood, and she said only, "Go to the shore, lass. Whatever you choose, choose it there, by the water. Not in this small room." So Mara took her daughter's hand, and the two of them walked out of the croft and down the cliff path toward the shore, the mother carrying the gray skin, the child not quite understanding, both of them moving toward the water like the tide going out. When they reached the sand, the sea answered. The water before them boiled with gray backs. Every seal of the skerry had come. And among them, in the shallows, rose the great Grey King himself. And as Mara watched, he rose up out of his sealskin into the shape of a towering man, and held out his hand to her across the water. "Daughter," the king said, in the old tongue that Aelid could not understand but somehow felt, "we have kept your place. Come home. You have given them your years, and your youth, and very nearly your life. You owe the dry land nothing more. The sea forgives. The sea always forgives. Come home." And there it was, the moment from the very start of our story, the one I asked you to hold. A woman on a moonlit shore, her own gray skin pressed to her face, the seals calling, a child behind her and the whole sea before her. We have come all the way around to it at last. But the choice is not made yet. Because at that very moment, a cry came from the cliff path. Callum had come. He stood at the top of the path, having seen it all, his wife with the skin in her hands and the sea risen up to take her, and he began, stumbling, weeping, to run down toward the shore. He reached the sand. He fell to his knees before her. He did not try to take the skin. He had learned finally that lesson out on the storm sea. Instead, he said the words he should have said years ago. He said, "Go. If the sea is your life, then go. I will not hold you anymore. I am sorry. Go." And that, the old tellers always said, was the moment Callum became, at last, the man he might always have been. Too late to keep her, but not too late to love her rightly. For the first time in all their years, he held nothing back. He gave her the only gift left to give, her freedom. Mara looked at her husband, freed of his fear at last. She looked at the great king in the surf, and her own people in their hundreds, all waiting. She looked at the soft gray skin in her own two hands, herself, her sea, her whole lost life. And then she looked at Aelid, and she made her choice. She knelt in the sand and pulled the gray skin around her shoulders. The change began, soft and silver, the sea-pale woman flowing into the shape of a great gray seal, but she held it half-finished, half woman and half seal, just long enough to take her daughter's face in her changing hands one last time. She pressed her brow to her daughter's and she said, "I am not leaving you. I will be in every wave that touches this shore. Listen for me, the way I taught you. The sea is always speaking, and from now on some of what it says will be only for you." And then she slipped into the water and she was gone. Hold that. We will pick it up again. For a long moment after she vanished, no one on the shore moved. The seals slipped away one by one. The great king sank beneath the water, and then there were only two, a kneeling man and a small girl, alone on the wet sand with the tide coming in. Aelid did not cry, not at first. She stood at the very edge of the water and watched the place where the gray seal had gone down, certain that her mother would come back up. The water stayed empty, the light failed, and only then did the child begin to understand. Callum gathered his daughter up off the cold sand. She did not fight him. She had given her mother back herself, and her mother had gone, and the child's heart could not yet fit the size of what she had done. He carried her up the dark cliff path, and neither of them spoke. The croft was unbearable that night. The sea treasures still sat in their row on the sill, the shells, the stones, the green glass. The blanket still smelled of her. The empty chair by the fire was an empty chair again, the way it had been before she came. Callum sat in the dark and did not light the fire. Maybe you know that particular silence, the one that comes into a house when someone has gone. How loud the small sounds get, the settle creaking, the wind in the thatch. How the empty places seem to hum. Callum and Aelid lived inside that silence now. But the old tellers did not end the story there, because a Selkie who leaves her human family does not vanish from them the way the drowned vanish. She is not dead, she is only changed, and she is only ever as far away as the nearest wave. The morning after she left, Aelid went down to the shore alone before the sun was up. She did not expect anything, she only could not stay away from the last place she had seen her mother. And there, waiting in the shallows, was a gray seal, watching the path, watching for her. Aelid waded into her knees. The seal came close enough to touch, and looked at her with eyes she knew. Dark and deep and rimmed the way her own were rimmed, and the child understood. "Ma'am," she whispered, and the seal pressed its brow, gently, against her small cold hand. So it became their way. Each dawn and each dusk, Aelid went down to the shore, and her mother was there in the water, waiting. They could not speak as they once had, but they did not need words. The girl sat in the shallows, and the seal lay close, and they kept each other company as the tide came and went. Here is the part that is easy to miss, but it changes everything. Mara had not chosen the sea over her daughter. She had chosen the sea and her daughter in the only shape that let her have both. She had found a way to stay close without being caged. That was the gift inside the grief. But Callum could not go down to the shore. He could not bear to see her there in the water, so near and so utterly beyond his reach. The wife he had loved wearing the shape that proved he had never truly known her. So he stayed up at the croft and watched from the cliff, and grieved alone. The village, which had come to love Mara after the storm, mourned her leaving in its quiet way. They did not ask Callum what had happened. They knew the shape of it. "A man who keeps the sea will lose it," the old folk said, and shook their heads, and left bread on his step, and let him be. Old Bessa came, of course. She found Callum hollow by his cold hearth, and she lit his fire for him, and she made him eat, and she said, "You did the one right thing at the end, you let her go. Hold on to that. It is more than most men manage." He did not answer, but he wept, and that was something. Slowly life found a new shape. Callum learned to cook the plain meals Mara had made. He learned to plait his daughter's wild hair, clumsily, with his big scarred hands. The croft was quieter and sadder, but it was a home still. Grief, it turns out, can live in a house without emptying it. But here's where a new worry crept in, cold and slow, like a draft under a door. Aelid spent more and more of her days at the shore. She swam farther out each week, in colder water, for longer. The sea did not bite her, it welcomed her. And Callum began to be afraid in a new way. Because Aelid was her mother's daughter. Half of the sea ran in her blood, and the older she grew, the more the water seemed to call her too, not with the seal's song, but with something quieter, something in her own bones. Callum had lost his wife to the sea. He was terrified, now, of losing his child to it as well. He did not make the old mistake again. He did not try to lock her away from the water, or hide the shore from her, or hold her down with fear. He had learned that lesson at a terrible price, but the not doing was its own kind of agony. He had to watch her drift toward the sea, and let her, and say nothing. One dusk he came down to the shore at last, the first time since she left, because Eilid had not come home, and his old terror had driven him down the path. And he found his daughter far out in the dim water, swimming among a dozen gray seals, as if she were one of them. And among the seals, larger than the rest, was the great gray king. He swam slow circles around the child, watching her, the way a grandfather watches a grandchild to see what she is made of, and Callum understood, with a lurch of pure fear, that the sea was not just visiting his daughter, it was considering her. That night Callum could not sleep. The new threat had a clear and terrible shape now. Eilid was half a creature of the sea. One day, perhaps soon, the water might call her the way it had called her mother, and offer her a skin of her own. And if it did, Callum knew, he could not, must not hold her back. The next dawn, down at the shore, he did something he had never done. He waded into the cold shallows to where the gray seal, Mara, waited, and he stood before her in the water, shaking, and he spoke to his wife in her seal shape, man to seal, for the very first time. He said, "I will not hold our daughter the way I held you, I swear it, but I am asking you, as her mother, to help me. When the sea calls her, let it be her choice, freely made, with both shores open to her. Do not let them take her the way I once took you." The seal looked at him a long while with those deep, knowing eyes, and then she dipped her head once, slow, deliberate, unmistakable. A promise given. Whatever Eilid became, she would choose it freely, with both her worlds laid open before her. It was the first thing Callum and Mara had ever agreed upon as equals. From that day, something eased in Callum. He still feared losing Eilid, but the fear no longer ran his hands. He had learned the lesson the hard way, that you keep the ones you love by opening your grip, not closing it. He let his daughter belong to the sea a little so that she might choose to stay. And so the strange family settled into its strange new shape. A father on the land, a mother in the sea, a daughter who walked between them, belonging wholly to neither, carrying both. It was not the family Callum had stolen all those years ago. It was a truer one, sadder and truer and free. The seasons turned. Eilid grew from a child into a long-legged girl, and then toward a young woman, salt-haired and sea-eyed, more at home on the water than any soul in the village. And every dawn and dusk, faithful as the tide itself, the gray seal was there at the shore, watching her grow. But Callum was growing older too. The hard work and the hard years had bent his broad shoulders. His gray hair went white. His scarred hands grew stiff and slow. The man who had once rowed into a killing storm could no longer manage the boat alone, and the sea, which is patient, began to wait for him in a different way. Eilid, nearly grown, ran the croft now and cared for her father, and went each day to the sea. She stood at a threshold of her own, old enough soon to choose her whole life, land or sea, the warm fire of her father or the wide water of her mother. The choice was coming, she could feel it, the way her mother had taught her to feel the tide. So the story is not over. It has only handed itself down, from a mother to a daughter, the way these stories always do. The question that caught Mara has come round again to catch Eilid. What do you do when you belong to two worlds, and you can keep only one of them whole? We are coming now, toward the deepest turn of the whole tale. The night an old man's life draws to its close, and the sea comes ashore one last time. And a young woman finally chooses her shore. But that is still ahead. For now, let the seasons rest. Let the old man doze by his fire. Tonight, just this. Let me carry you forward now, through the long middle years of this strange family, the way the tide carries you slow and steady out from the shore. Years where nothing broke and nothing healed all the way, and a girl grew up with one foot in the sea. The meetings at the shore never stopped. Every dawn, every dusk, Eilide went down, and her seal mother was there. The girl would tell her about the day, the catch, the weather, the small troubles of a growing heart, and the seal would listen and answer in the only ways a seal can. It was enough. It had to be. Maybe you have loved someone you could only meet halfway. someone behind a distance you could not cross, an illness, a sea, a silence. And maybe you learned, as Eyelid learned, that half a meeting faithfully kept is its own kind of whole. They never missed a dawn, not one. Mara, for her part, had her sea back, and found it was not the simple homecoming she had dreamed through all those landlocked years. She swam the kelp forests with her people. She rode the deep currents. She was free, and every dawn she went to the shore and looked at her daughter and ached the other way now. This is the truth. The old tale never softened. There was no shore where Mara could be whole. On the land she had ached for the sea. In the sea she ached for her daughter. To belong to two worlds is to be forever a little homesick, wherever you stand. Perhaps you know that ache as well. Eyelid felt that same divided pull growing in herself as the years went on. On land she missed the weightless deep. In the deep she missed the warm fire and her aging father. She was her mother's daughter through and through, and her mother's question was becoming her own. The great Grey King watched Eyelid grow, season by season, from the deep water. He saw how easily she swam, how the cold did not touch her, how the seals gathered to her without fear, and in the slow, patient way of the sea, he began to make up his ancient mind about her. There was a thing the sea folk could do, the oldest of them, the king most of all. For one born of mixed blood, half land, half sea, they could make a skin, a gray skin of her very own that would let her slip into the water and become wholly one of them, forever. They could offer Eyelid the sea, completely. But, and this was the king's old law, such a skin could only be given, never forced. The girl would have to choose it freely, with both her shores open before her, exactly as Callum had begged of Mara in the Dawn Shallows years ago. The promise made then would be kept now. The choice would be Eyelid's alone. Mara knew what the king intended, and it tore her in a way the land had never managed. She wanted her daughter with her in the deep, more than she had ever wanted anything. And she wanted her daughter to have the warm, whole human life she herself had been robbed of. Both wants were true. They always are. So Mara did the hardest thing of all. She decided to say nothing. She would not weigh the choice with her own longing. She would not let Eyelid choose the sea just to please a grieving mother, or choose the land just to ease one. The girl would have to find her own true shore, alone, as we all must. Up at the croft, Callum had grown into a gentle, white-haired old man. The hard edges the years had given him had worn smooth again, the way a sharp stone wears smooth in the sea. He spent his evenings telling Eyelid stories, and at long last he told her all of hers. He told her how he had found her mother dancing on the moonlit sand, how he had taken the gray skin out of a loneliness so deep he had mistaken it for love. He held nothing back, not even his own shame. I did a wrong thing, he told her. A wrong thing, for a sad reason. Do not do as I did. Ever. Hold nothing you love too tight. Eyelid was not angry with him. She had grown up inside the truth of it, even before she had the words. And she had watched her father learn the hard way to open his hands. The man who had stolen a skin had become a man who let his own daughter belong to the sea. She loved him for the distance he had traveled. Do you see how the wound and the wisdom came from the same place? Callum could not have taught her to let go if he had not first held on too tight, and paid for it, and learned. The deepest things we know, we usually learned the hard way. He gave his daughter that hard-won wisdom like a dowry. The old man's one remaining sorrow was that he had never made his peace with Mara herself. He had spoken to her once in the shallows, seal and man, and asked her help for their daughter. But he had never said the deepest words, the sorry that was too big for that dawn. It sat in him still, a stone he carried. He was too proud, or too afraid, or too old to go down to the water and say it. So the years went on, and the stone stayed in him, and the gray seal kept her faithful dawns at the shore, and the old man watched her from the cliff and could not close the last of the distance between them. Remember that distance. It matters, before the end. Eyelid became the bridge between them, the way children of divided parents so often do. She carried her father's small kindnesses down to the seal at the shore. She carried the sea's gifts, a fine fish, a strange shell, back up to the old man's fire. She kept the two halves of her broken family gently joined. One evening, a young fisherman from the next bay came courting Eyelid. He was kind and steady, and he looked at her the way Callum had once looked at Mara, but without the fear, without the wanting to keep. He offered her an ordinary, warm, whole human life, and for a while Eyelid let herself imagine it. She imagined the warm croft of her own, the children, the fire, the long human years. It was a good dream, a real one. But every time she walked down to the shore and the cold sea kissed her ankles, something in her deep blood whispered, "There is more of you than this. You are also the wide water. Do not forget what you are." This was Eilidh's whole dilemma, and maybe you have stood near it yourself. Two good lives, and you can only live one. The safe, warm shore that asks you to be less than your whole self. The wild, deep water that asks you to leave behind everyone you love, which is the betrayal, staying or going. She asked her seal mother about it, one gray dawn, not for an answer, just to say it aloud. The seal listened the way she always did, and then she did something she had never done. She dived and came up with something in her mouth and laid it gently on the rock at Eilidh's feet. It was a smooth gray stone, worn through the middle by the sea, with a hole clean through its heart. A hagstone, the old folk called it, a stone you could look through. Eilidh did not know what her mother meant by it. She kept it, on the cord at her neck, beside the spiral shell of her childhood, and she wondered. She would understand it later. A stone you look through, a way of seeing both sides of a thing at once, the near and the far, the land and the sea, through one small worn window. Her mother had given her not an answer, but a way of seeing that sometimes is the kinder gift. The young fisherman, kind as he was, grew tired of waiting for an answer Eilidh could not give. He married a girl from his own bay in the end. Eilidh did not grieve it much. She had known, somewhere underneath, that her life was not going to be an ordinary one. Some lives are not. Perhaps you have always known that about your own. So Eilidh stayed at the croft and cared for her aging father, and went each day to her seal mother, and carried the hagstone, and waited for the choice to ripen. She was in no hurry. Her mother had taught her that the sea cannot be rushed, and neither can a true decision. It comes when the tide is right. The village had long since made its peace with the family on the hill. The strange wife who became a seal was an old story now, half legend, told to children at the fire. Eilidh, the seal woman's daughter, was treated with a wary respect. They came to her when the sea took someone. She knew its moods. She could comfort the drowned bereaved like no priest could. When a fisherman was lost, Eilidh would go to the shore and speak to the seals. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes the body would be brought gently to the sand by gray shepherds in the night, so that the family could grieve it properly. The village did not understand it. They were only grateful, and they stopped being afraid. So Mara's leaving, which had seemed like pure loss, had grown into something the whole shore was better for. The sea and the village, once wary strangers, now had a daughter who walked between them and kept the peace. The Selkie's grief had become the coast's quiet blessing. Loss does that, sometimes, given years enough. But the years pressed harder on Callum now. His chest grew heavy in the winters. His steps grew short. He could no longer climb the cliff path, and so he sat at his window and watched the sea, the way Mara once had. The two of them, in the end, looking at the same water from opposite shores of a long life. One winter evening he said to Eilidh, "Your mother used to look at the sea like it had something of hers in it. I never understood. Back then, I thought she was looking away from me. Now I sit here and I look at it the same way, and I think perhaps she was only looking at the truest part of herself." Eilidh carried those words down to the shore the next dawn and spoke them to the gray seal. "He understands now, ma'am," she said. "He sees it. He is sorry." And the seal grew very still in the water, and her dark eyes shone, and Eilidh knew the message had landed where it was meant to land. So the long distance between Callum and Mara began, at last, to close, not in person but through their daughter, word by careful word. He could not reach the water and she could not reach the croft, but Eilidh could reach both, and she carried their late, gentle peace between them like a lit candle through the dark. Callum's last good summer was a gentle one. He sat in the sun outside the croft. Eilidh brought him broth and stories. The gray seal came up onto the rocks below, closer than she had dared in years, so that the old man at his window and the seal on the rocks could, at last, see one another across the small remaining distance. They would sit like that for hours on the warm days, the old man and the seal, looking at one another across the rocks and the years. They did not need to be closer. After a whole life of holding too tight, Callum had learned the last lesson. Sometimes love is just this. Two souls, keeping each other company across a distance neither can cross. Maybe that is a kind of love, you know? Not the holding kind, the keeping company kind, the love that sits with someone across an unbridgeable distance and simply stays, faithful, asking nothing, just so that neither of you has to be alone in it. The old man and the seal had found their way to that at the very end. As autumn came on, the old man weakened. He slept more. He ate less. Eyelid knew the signs, the way her mother had taught her to know the turning of any tide. Her father was going out, slow and sure, like water leaving the sand, and she made up her mind that he would not go out alone. She went down to the shore and told the gray seal. "He is going, ma'am," she said. "Soon." And the seal listened, and then she turned and swam out, not away, but out toward the deep, toward the far rock where the great king kept his court, as if she were going to ask permission for something, as if she had a plan. For 3 days the gray seal did not come to the shore. Eyelid sat by her father, and waited, and watched the empty water, and wondered where her mother had gone, and feared she had lost them both at once. But the sea, as her mother always said, cannot be rushed. Something was being decided, far out, on the old king's rock. Let me step away from the bedside for a moment, the way the old tellers always did before the hardest part, and tell you how this story even reached us. Because a tale like this was not written in any book, not for a very long time. It was carried mouth to ear, fire to fire, mother to child. On the long northern nights when the dark came by mid-afternoon and the wind locked everyone indoors, the islanders told stories to hold the dark back. The Selkie tales were favorites. Every family had its own version. Some even claimed the seal blood ran in their own line. And so the tale stayed alive, told and retold, for 1,000 winters. The old women were the great keepers of it. They wove the Selkie's story into lullabies, into work songs, into the rhythm of carding wool and rocking cradles. A girl might hear of the seal wife 100 times before she was grown, until the tale was woven into the very grain of who she was. And there was a song, the saddest and most famous of them all, about a Selkie who was the great seal of a far rock, Sul Scary, and the human woman who bore his child. For centuries, mothers sang it low over their cradles. It is still sung today. The seal folk swam through the music, and the music kept them alive. So when you hear this story tonight, you are doing the oldest thing in the world. You are sitting by a fire, in the dark, letting an old voice carry a tale across the years to you. 1,000 sleepers have drifted off to this story before you. Now it is your turn. Let us go back to the bedside. On the 3rd night of the seal's absence, Callum woke from a long sleep, clear-eyed and calm. "Eyelid," he said softly, "carry me down to the shore. I want to see the sea up close, one more time. I have watched it from this window long enough. Take me to the water." She did not argue. She wrapped him in his warmest blanket, and she was strong from a life of the sea, and she carried her father down the cliff path in the dark, slow and careful, just as he had once carried her up it on the night her mother left. The wheel of it was not lost on either of them. She laid him gently on the soft sand at the water's edge, propped against a smooth rock facing the sea. The night was clear and the moon was round and low, the very same kind of moon, he realized, as the night he had first come down to this shore and seen a woman dancing. The wheel had come all the way around. And then the water stirred. Out beyond the breakers, gray heads began to rise, dozens, then hundreds. The whole host of the seal folk come silent in the moonlight. They had been waiting, and among them, swimming slowly toward the shore, came one seal with something held carefully in her care. Mara had come back, and she had not come back empty. This is what she had gone to the deep for, those 3 days. This is what had been decided on the old king's rock. The great Grey King had granted her one last gift, the rarest the sea folk possessed. For one single night she could come ashore as a woman, without her skin trapping her, freely, to say a goodbye she had never been able to say. This is the darkest and the brightest moment of the whole story. Both at once, the way the deepest moments always are. An old man dying on the sand, the sea risen up around him, and out of the moonlit water, rising slowly to her feet, a woman he had not touched in 20 years, walking toward him across the shore. Stay with this. She knelt in the sand beside him. Old frail Callum looked up at the face he had loved and wronged and lost, unchanged, sea-pale, dark-eyed, exactly as she had been the night he stole her skin. And his own face crumpled, and the stone he had carried for 20 years finally broke open in his chest. He said the words at last, the ones too big for that dawn in the shallows years ago. "I am sorry," he said, "for the skin, for the years, for loving you in the wrong shape, the holding shape, when you only ever wanted to be free. I am sorry, and I never stopped. I never once stopped loving you." And Mara, who had grieved him and missed him and forgiven him slowly across 20 years of dawns, took his old face in her hands and said, "I know, I knew, and I loved you too, even caged. That was the hardest part, that I could be so caged and love my jailer still, but I did. I do." They sat together on the sand the whole of that night, the old man and the sea woman and their grown daughter between them, and they talked, the three of them, the way they had never once been able to talk as a whole family, of the good years, the hard ones, the love that survived all of it in its strange and broken shape. As the night wore on toward dawn, Callum grew weaker and calmer, and his breathing slowed. He was not afraid. How could he be afraid? With the sea he had feared all his life risen up gentle around him, and the woman he had wronged holding his hand, and his daughter at his side, he had everything. At the very end, he had everything. He looked out at the lightening sea and then up at Mara, and he smiled and he said one last thing. "Go free now," he said. "Both of you, whatever she chooses, let her choose it free." And then his eyes closed and his breath went out like a wave drawing back over sand, and he was gone, gently, with the dawn. They sat with him a long while in the new light. Mara wept for the man who had caged her and loved her, and there was no contradiction in her tears. You can grieve someone who wronged you. You can love your whole life the one who took your freedom. The heart was never simple. The old people knew. So do you, I think. They gave Callum to the sea, as he would have wanted, a fisherman's funeral, the whole village on the shore, his body carried out on the morning tide. And the seal folk came, the entire host of them, and shepherded him gently out past the breakers, the way they had once carried him home alive through the storm. And so the man who once stole the sea's daughter was given, at the end, to the sea's keeping, gently with honor, forgiven. The water that he had wronged took him home. There is a mercy in that you do not often find in the old harsh tales. But this was never a harsh tale. It was a tale about learning, too late but not too late, how to love. But Mara's single night ashore was nearly spent. The king's gift was for one night only, and the sun was climbing now. She had said her goodbye to Callum. There was one goodbye left to make, the hardest one of all. She turned from the funeral sea to her daughter, who stood alone now between the land and the water, an orphan of the shore. And here at last, the great inherited choice came due. For Mara held in her hands the gift the king had made, a small gray skin, new and soft, sized for a half-sea girl, Elido's own skin. The sea was making its offer. "Come with me, daughter, become wholly one of us, or stay and be wholly of the land. Choose, freely, now." Elid looked at the skin in her mother's hands. She looked at the deep sea, where she could swim forever weightless and free among her own kind, never alone again, with her mother beside her always. Everything in her sea blood leaned toward it. It would have been so easy and so sweet to simply walk into the water and never look back. But then she lifted the hagstone at her neck, her mother's gift, the stone you look through, and she held it to her eye, and she looked at the sea through its small worn window, and she understood at last what her mother had been telling her all those years ago. You do not have to choose only one. There is a way to see both. Aelid lowered the stone, and she made her choice, and it was neither of the two she had been offered. "Ma'am," she said, "I will not take the skin, but I will not turn from the sea either. I am the bridge between. Someone has to stand on this shore and keep both worlds joined. Let that someone be me." It was the choice neither Mara nor the king had foreseen because it was wiser than both. Mara had been torn in two her whole life between land and sea. But Aelid, born of both, would not be torn. She would be the seam that held them together. She would live on the shore, the threshold, and belong fully to the in-between. Maybe that is the choice you have been circling too. Not the safe shore, not the wild deep, but the harder, truer place between them, where you keep faith with every part of yourself at once, and belong to the threshold, and refuse to be torn in half by a world that wants you to pick a side. Aelid chose that. It takes great courage. She had it. Mara wept, but this time the tears were not grief. They were pride and relief and a fierce mother's joy, her daughter would not inherit her sorrow. Aelid had found the third path, the whole one, the one Mara herself had been robbed of. The chain had been broken, the wound would not be passed on. That is the best thing a parent can ever do. So Mara did not give her daughter the skin. Instead, she folded it small and pressed it back into the sea's keeping, and she took Aelid's face in her hands one last time, as the sun climbed and her single night ran out, and she told her how to keep the worlds joined when she was gone. "Come to the shore at every dawn and every dusk," she said, "the way we always have. I will be in the water. I cannot walk as a woman again. This was the one night, and it is spent. But I will be the seal who meets you. For all the years of your long life, I will be there. You will never come to this shore and find it empty. That is my promise." And then the sun broke fully over the water, and the gift was spent, and Mara's woman shape began gently to fade back. She held her daughter's eyes until the very last moment of it. Then she slipped into the bright shallows, and the gray skin took her, and where a woman had stood there was a seal who lingered a moment, watching, and then was gone into the deep. But this time, Aelid did not weep at the empty water, because she knew now that it was not empty. Her mother was in it. Her father was in it. Everyone she had loved had gone into that gray, patient sea, and the sea had kept them and given them back to her as wave and seal and song. The shore was not a place of loss, it was a place of meeting. She climbed back up the cliff path to the croft alone and lit the fire and set the kettle to sing. The little house was hers now. The row of sea treasures still sat on the sill. She added the hagstone to them. And she did not feel alone. She felt, for the first time in her life, completely and exactly where she belonged. From that day on, Aelid kept the shore. She met her seal mother every dawn and every dusk, faithful as the tide, for all the long years of her life, and the sea never once let her down. She would walk to the water, and there her mother would be, dark eyes shining, and the two of them would keep each other company across the only distance left between them. She became the woman the whole coast turned to. When the sea took a fisherman, she went to the shore and asked, and often the sea answered. When a child was born, she tied a thread to the standing stone for it. She kept the old reverence alive. She was the keeper of the threshold, exactly as she had chosen to be, and she was content. In time she took a husband after all. A quiet man who understood that her heart kept dawn and dusk for the sea, and did not try to keep her from it. He had learned the lesson Callum learned too late. He loved her with open hands. And so the family that began with a stolen skin ended, generations on, in a love that finally knew how to let the other be free. Her children played at the same tide pools she had played in, and when they grew old enough, she taught them to sit still and listen, the way her mother had taught her. The sea is always speaking, she told them, and she would point to a certain gray seal that came faithfully to the shore. Your grandmother, she would say. Go on, say hello. And the gray seal would lift her head and look at the laughing children with her deep dark eyes and know them for her own. So the sea blood ran on down the years, and the dawn meetings never stopped, and the love that had been caged and freed and broken and mended kept on, quietly, generation after generation, on a small gray shore at the edge of the world. And that is the whole of it. The tale of the seal woman, the lonely man, and the daughter who would not be torn in two. Not a story of monsters, a story of how hard it is to love a wild thing rightly, and how the only way to keep what you love is to open your hands and let it choose to stay. We are nearly to the end of our night together, but before we let the story settle into sleep, let me show you how far it has traveled, out from that one small shore across the whole wide world, all the way down to the screen you may be holding now. The seal folk swam a very long way. For a long time, the Selkie lived only on the islands where she was born, Orkney, Shetland, the Hebrides, the wild north coasts. She was a local secret, told in the old tongues, sung in the old songs, believed in by the old folk who lived close enough to the sea to know it had moods and memory and maybe a heart. Then the folklorists came with their notebooks, walking the islands to write down the old tales before they were lost. They gathered the Selkie stories from the firesides and put them in books, and so the seal folk slipped out of the spoken dark and onto the printed page and began to swim into the wider world. And from the page, she swam onto the screen. Filmmakers who knew a true and aching story when they found one brought the seal folk to the whole world. A girl on an Irish island searching for a brother lost to the sea, an animated tale of a small Selkie child, and a song that could call the magic home. Millions wept at stories they did not know were 1,000 years old. And still, on the real islands, some families quietly say the seal blood runs in their line. They point to a webbing between the fingers, a love of the water too deep to explain, an ancestor who came from no one knew where. The Selkie was never only a story to them. She was a grandmother. She still is. So the seal folk swam all the way from one moonlit shore to you, tonight, wherever you are. That is the strange immortality of a true story. It does not stay where it was born, it travels, mouth to ear, page to screen, century to century, looking always for one more heart to swim into. Tonight it found yours. Let us bring it gently home. Let us go back, one last time, to the shore. Long years have passed now since that dawn of choosing. Eyelid has grown old herself, silver-haired, sea-eyed, content. She still walks down to the water every dawn and every dusk, and the gray seal still comes. Neither of them has ever broken the promise. She sits on the same flat rock where she sat as a child. She tells the seal about her day, her children, her children's children, and the seal listens, dark eyes shining, the way she has always listened. 40 years of dawns, 40 years of dusks, a whole life faithfully kept at the edge of the sea. And maybe that is the deepest comfort the whole tale has to offer, that love does not always look the way we first wanted it to. Sometimes it cannot live in the same house, or the same shape, or even the same world, but it can still be faithful. It can still show up every dawn at the edge of the water. It can still stay. The sea below the croft is calm tonight. The moon is round and low, the way it was at the very beginning. The same shore, the same silver light, the same patient water, but no grief in it now, only the long, gentle quiet of a story that has found its rest, and you are nearly there too. I can feel it. Let your breath go long and slow now, the way the tide goes out, in, like a wave gathering, out, like a wave returning to the sea. There is nothing left in the story to fear. Everyone is home, the man is in the sea, the mother is in the sea, and the daughter keeps the shore that joins them all. If your eyes are heavy now, let them close. You do not need to hear how it ends. There is no ending, really, only the tide, going out and coming in, the seal at the shore each dawn, the love that learned to stay by letting go. It will all still be here, turning, whether you're awake for it or not. We have come a long way tonight, you and I, from a feeling you could not name, out onto a moonlit shore, through a stolen skin and a long captivity and a storm and a leaving and a death and a daughter who would not be torn. And now we are here, at the gentle end, where the only sound is the sea. Before we slip into the very last quiet, hold on to one thing from the seal folk. The thing you love most does not belong to you. It belongs to itself. And the truest love you can give it is not a holding but an opening. Callum learned that too late. Eyelid learned it in time. May you learn it gently and never the hard way. The fire in the old croft has burned down to embers. The kettle is quiet. The sea treasures glint on the sill, the hagstone among them. Somewhere out in the dark water, a gray seal floats peacefully under the moon. And on the hill, the little house holds its warmth against the night, the way it always has. There is nothing more you need to do tonight. No choice to make, no skin to find, no shore to keep. All of that belongs to the people in the story. Your only task now is to rest and to let the sound of the sea carry you down, slow and easy, into sleep. The tide has you. It will not let you go too far.
We are almost at the close. But there is one last small scene the old tellers always saved for the very end. A quiet thing, on the shore, at the edge of sleep. Let me give it to you now, soft as a wave, and then we will say our goodnight. Stay with me just a moment longer.
It is dawn on the shore, the last dawn of our story. An old silver-haired Eyelid walks down to the water, as she has every morning of her long life. But this morning her steps are slow, and her breath is short, and she knows, the way her mother taught her to know the tide, that her own going out has come. She sits on the flat rock one final time, and the gray seal comes, her mother, faithful across all the long years, exactly as promised. But this dawn the seal does not stay in the water. This dawn the sea has granted one last grace. The gray seal rises up out of the shallows, and the skin falls away, and Mara steps onto the sand as a woman once more. She is unchanged, sea-pale, dark-eyed, young as the night she danced. She kneels before her daughter, who is now older than she will ever be, and she takes the old, lined, beloved face in her ageless hands. You kept the shore, she says. All your life, you kept it. You held the worlds together. Thank you, my brave one. You can rest now. Come. And this time there is a second skin, soft and gray and waiting. The one eyelid refused as a young woman, kept for her by the sea across all the long faithful years, for this exact morning. She had chosen the threshold for her life, but death is a threshold too. And now, at the very end, the sea opens its arms to take its keeper home. The old woman smiles and lays down her long life like setting down a heavy basket, and takes the skin at last. And where two women knelt on the dawn sand, two gray seals slip into the brightening sea, one ageless, one newly free, and swim out together side by side into the deep gold light and are gone. Home, both of them, home at last. Hold that, we will close gently now. The story is told now, but let us sit with it a little longer, the way you sit by a fire after the tale is done, and ask quietly what it has always meant. The sealskin was never only a skin, it was a self, the wild, true, free part of a person, the part that knows the deep water it was made for. And everyone, the old story says, has had a skin taken once, by a love, by a duty, by a fear, by a life that needed them small and dry. Maybe you can feel where yours went, the work you set down, the wide thing you used to be, the water you have not let yourself near in years. But the story is gentle with the one who hides the skin too. Callum was not cruel, he was lonely and afraid of losing love. Most cages are built from fear, not malice. That is the hardest truth in the tale. The thing that caged her was love, real love, holding on too tightly. Love can imprison as surely as any chain. And the tale gives the answer too. You keep what you love by opening your hands, not closing them. Callum learned it late. The story hopes you will learn it sooner. The sea in the story is no villain. It is the deep self, patient and forgiving. It waits years for what is its own. It always, always forgives. And the shore, the place where land meets sea, is where Isladu chose to live, the threshold, the in-between. Neither one world nor the other, but the seam that joins them. Many of us are torn between two shores, a safe life and a true one, a duty and a calling. The story says, perhaps you need not choose only one. Aileda's hagstone holds that whole idea, a stone you look through, a way to see the near and the far, the land and the sea, through one small window at once. The tale carries a grief no kinder story dares, that you can love the one who wronged you, that the heart is not simple and never was, both things stay true, and it shows that loss can change its shape without ending. Mara did not vanish. She became the seal at the shore. Love does not always die. Sometimes it only transforms. The dawn and dusk meetings hold another gift. Faithfulness across a distance. Love that cannot share a house or a shape, but still shows up every single day. And the breaking of the chain that is the brightest thread. Aelid did not inherit her mother's sorrow. She found the whole path. The wound was not passed on. That may be the kindest thing any of us can do, to carry a hurt and feel its whole weight, and then set it down, so our children need not carry it too. Notice too that no one is punished here. No curse, no vengeance, no cruelty, only people loving imperfectly, and learning and being forgiven by a patient sea. Perhaps that is why this small island tale outlived the islands. It does not scold, it understands, it knows how hard it is to love a wild thing rightly. So if there is a skin somewhere in your own roof, yours or someone's you hold, let the story sit gently with you tonight. You need not decide anything, just feel where it is. The sea has kept this meaning for 1,000 years, and it will keep it after tonight. You can let it go now. Let the tide hold the lesson. You only need to rest. This story was born on the far northern islands, Orkney, Shetland, the wild edges of Scotland and Ireland, where the grey seals have eyes that look almost human. There Norse settlers and Celtic islanders mingled their stories. The seal folk grew from both, shape-changers of the deep kin who came ashore and could not always go home. For centuries it lived only in spoken words and sung verses. The most famous is a ballad of the great seal of Sule Skerry, sung low over cradles for generations. Then folklorists walked the islands with notebooks, gathering the tales before they faded. So the seal folk slipped from the spoken dark onto the printed page and traveled far. From the page she swam to the screen. A girl searching an Irish island for a lost brother. An animated child whose song could call the sea magic home. The world wept at 1,000-year-old grief. And still, on the real islands, some families quietly claim the seal blood, a webbing between the fingers, a pull to the water too deep to explain, an ancestor from nowhere. Painters, poets, and songwriters return to her again and again. The seal wife who longed for the sea has become one of the most beloved figures in all of Celtic memory. Why does she last? Because everyone, somewhere, has felt it. The longing for a truer self, the love that holds too tight, the pull of a home you can never quite reach. So the seal folk swam all the way from one moonlit shore to you. Tonight, mouth to ear, page to screen, century to century, looking for one more heart. Tonight it found yours, and now you can let it swim on, back into the deep, where it will rest until another quiet night calls it home again. The shore is quiet now. The moon lays its soft silver road across the water. Everyone is home. There is nothing left to do but rest. Let your breath go slow as the tide, in like a gathering wave, out like the sea drawing back, slower, softer. There is all the time in the world. Somewhere out past this shore, another story is already waiting. Somewhere colder perhaps, older, a different kind of fire in the dark. But not tonight. Tonight belongs to the seals and the silver water and you. The next story can keep. It has waited a long time already. We'll be here when you're ready. Another quiet night, another old story, waiting at the edge of the water for you. You do not have to remember any of it. The sea remembers for you. Let the story slip below the surface and be kept. If your eyes are closed already, leave them closed. You are exactly where you should be. The tide has you now. The seal floats peaceful under the moon. The shore breathes slow, and so do you. Slower now, softer, almost there. Sleep now. The sea will keep its watch, the way it always has. Nothing is lost. Everyone is home. All is well.
Good night. Rest deep and drift easy. The tide is breathing, and so are you. Good night.